Deep in the Amazon rainforest lives a people who could transform our understanding of human language.
They call themselves the Hiaichehe, which means the straight one. And our language is Apagaiso, a crooked head, a twisted head.
Daniel Everett's mission was to bring Jesus to this remote tribe, known as the Pirahã.
Well, my main aim was to translate the Bible for a group of people who didn't have the Bible.
Instead, the missionary found a group so content in their world, they converted him.
I've gone from a very fervent believer to an atheist.
Even more remarkable is what he discovered about their communication. According to Everett, Pirahã grammar breaks one of the fundamental rules of all human language. Half a world away, it sparked a bitter war of words.
I had people sending me hate mail. There was a lot of viciousness in the attacks, real anger.
Can't have anything to do with the nature of language. It just doesn't make any sense.
I think he knows he's wrong. That's what I really think.
I was appalled when I read that Chomsky had said that Dan was a charlatan. That is unacceptable.
Now a professor of linguistics, Daniel Everett is on a new mission to put his controversial claims to the test. If he's right, the most cited academic of our time could well be wrong. And our understanding of human language may be changed forever. In a remote corner of the Brazilian Amazon live the 400 remaining members of the Pirahã. Life has changed little here in centuries, but something about the Pirahã has caught the world's attention. It's how they communicate. Pirahã can be spoken, hummed, sung, even whistled.
I buy about 150 to 200 kilos of manioc meal, farinha, as it's known locally, for the Pirahã each time I go in.
400 kilometers upriver, Professor Daniel Everett is preparing for his annual research trip to the Pirahã. Everett has studied the tribe for 30 years, and what he claims to have found has made news around the globe.
There's just a narrow range of gifts that they want to receive. They want cloth, they want tools, they want maybe flashlights and batteries, fish hooks and line.
The linguistics professor and university dean believes the Pirahã language is so remarkable, it undermines the most powerful theory of human language. It's an explosive claim, and many are convinced he's wrong.
The gifts that I buy for the Pirahã are important to show them, first of all, that I appreciate and respect what they do, in helping me. They don't really understand what the value of the information they give me is, but they do know that it's of value to me. It's very important for me as a scientist to give other scientists more information so they can reach their own conclusions about some of the more controversial claims I've made about the Pirahã. And we're off after all the work that has gone on the last couple of days. Really excited.
The Pirahã live in 4 villages spread along the Maísi River, a tributary of the Amazon. First sighted by Portuguese gold hunters 300 years ago, the tribe has since rejected almost all outside influence. Unique amongst Amazonian groups, the Pirahã speak only their native tongue. But in the 1950s, the Pirahã were forced to open their world. With their children dying of measles, help arrived in the form of American missionaries. But with medicine came something less welcome. One of the missionaries who came was Daniel Everett.
This has to be one of the most beautiful river trips on the planet.
Everett first made this journey with his young family in 1977.
I was raised in Southern California, and I came from a very blue-collar family. My stepfather worked in a packing shed. My father was a cowboy. My mother was a waitress. I was playing my guitar all the time, flunking all my courses in high school, smoking marijuana every day, convinced I wanted to be a rock star. And then in high school, I met a fellow who had a Brazilian magazine. And I asked him where he got this Brazilian magazine. And he said, well, my parents are missionaries in Brazil. And he had this very cute sister named Karen, and we got to talking a lot about what to do with our lives, and we got romantically involved with one another from the time we were 16, and got engaged at 17, decided we wanted to be missionaries. And when I come back here now, I think a lot of the time that I arrived here originally with my family, and the work and the dreams and the aspirations and the love for these people, the love I felt for God at that time.
I was a passionate believer. I was ready to die for my faith and ready to do anything that my faith required of me. I had no idea when I started. Trying to convert another group of people is an inherently colonialist activity. It's colonialism of the mind, of beliefs. It's just another form of colonialism.
When Everett first arrived here, he was just 25 years old.
There's a Pirahã. There's our first Pirahã. I'm going to go down. So what happened? Yeah, I check up yo ago. I my eyes I bow I say aba I go. Yeah, check I go aga. Ege here. No. How aga? Okay. Just what I will fight so I che. They just recognize me.
The 4-day boat ride means even today the Pirahã receive few visitors. This is the first time they have seen a film crew. The Pirahã's clothing is their one concession to modern life. There are no permanent buildings, no cultivation, and they rely almost entirely on nature to meet their needs. Today, the professor is one of only 3 outsiders who can speak Pirahã, the others being his former wife and the missionary he replaced. Everett and his family lived intermittently here for more than 30 years.
This is all that's left of my house, just a few support posts here and there. I raised my children here for several years. I lived here for 8 years. I had a large Pirahã-style house. My wife almost died here. My daughter almost died here. I had malaria many times here. Our lives were threatened by the Pirahãs here on at least 3 separate occasions. They threatened to kill us all, and I had to sit up all night out in front of the house while my family was locked inside to try to keep them away. They shot arrows at each other. They were really different then, and our relationship has changed over the years.
Today, Dan shares a more harmonious relationship with the Pirahã. This morning, they cook scrambled alligator eggs for him. But sharing this way of life would have been impossible if Everett had not first cracked their language code.
So if you just arrived here among the Pirahã and you didn't speak a word of the language, how would you go about learning the language in the midst of all of this? Well, you start with, since there's no language in common, I just start picking up objects and trying to get the names for those objects, pointing at them. Này, phôi mấy cái cầu với, phôi mấy cái cầu với, phôi mấy cái cầu, tái, 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 tái mấy cái cầu với, tái mấy cái cầu với. And spending day after day doing this, you can see how you can construct the knowledge of the language without any language in common, and eventually I learned Pirahã.
Everett's teacher was Kohoi.
Ồ ghê thì có ai ồ ghê chạy chị cái nè ai phải chia sẻ bia ai ồ ghê thì có ai ya bay
The word for ear is awe, and the word for skin is awe, and the word for foreigner is awe, and the word for hand is awe, and the word for Brazil nut shell is awe, and that's only distinguished by the tones, all of those.
As his fluency grew, Everett began to realize something was missing. The Pirahã have no words for colors, no past or future tense, and incredibly, the Pirahã have no numbers. Research from MIT indicates the Pirahã may be the only culture on Earth without numeracy.
The Pirahã don't have numbers because they don't need them. They survive just fine without them. Somebody asked me once, you mean Pirahã mothers don't know how many children they have? Well, that's exactly what I mean. They don't know how many children they have, but they know all of their children's names and they know all of their children's faces. They don't need to know how many children they have to know who their children are and how they feel about them.
Years of hunting with these people led Everett to another discovery. The Pirahã have an encyclopedic knowledge of their world.
Every Pirahã child, woman, and man in the entire culture knows the name of every single species of flora and fauna in their environment. The thousands of different species that they encounter, they not only can give you the name of, they can describe in detail. They can tell you what they eat, they can tell you how they live, they can tell you where they're found.
As Everett immersed himself in their world, he had a profound realization. The Pirahã appear to live entirely in the present.
They're not worried about whether they're going to eat later because they know very well they can just go out in the river and get fish. They let each activity be dictated by their needs of the moment rather than by their worries of the future or their knowledge of the past. They live in the present.
For many, the pursuit of happiness means living free of regret and future worry. It's something the Pirahã seem to have mastered.
When I'm around these people and I'm by myself with them and I talk to them, they're just so relaxed and so laid back and so hard to agitate and get excited or get worried. They just have so much to teach us about taking each day one day at a time.
The contentment Everett witnessed affected him profoundly. He began to question his own deep beliefs.
The dilemma for the Christian missionary is for your message to work, you have to convince them that they're wrong. So they have to be lost before you can convince them that they need to be saved. I eventually realized that the Pirahã are happy already. They don't believe in hell. They don't believe in heaven. So taking the message of God to the Pirahã is like taking ice to the Eskimos.
In 25 years of missionary work, Daniel Everett failed to attract a single Pirahã convert.
The questioning of my own faith began as I saw how happy the Pirahã were, as I tried to answer their very probing and direct questions about the nature of the evidence that I had for what I believed. And as I reflected on all of these things, it eventually led to the abandonment of my own faith.
This dramatic change triggered the breakup of Everett's family.
It was a traumatic experience to have a relationship of over 30 years come to an end like that. I mean, we got married when we were 18, but much more difficult to me was the fact that my children didn't speak to me for 2 years. And even today, they struggle with some things based on how radically I've diverged from the father that they thought I was in terms of my beliefs.
Abandoning missionary life, Everett began to focus on his academic career. He had long suspected something was fundamentally different about Pirahã grammar. And if his hunch was right, it could transform our understanding of human language.
the time that I was going through the spiritual crisis and the family crisis and the marriage crisis, I was also going through an intellectual crisis. And I had to say something about this at the same time that I tried to explain a number of the unique characteristics of the Pirahã language. I had no idea when I started writing this paper that it was going to be controversial to the degree that it was.
Daniel Everett had just picked a fight with the father of modern linguistics, Noam Chomsky.
Noam is not only the most influential linguist in this sense of the past century, but I think it's probably the case that he's the most influential linguist of all time.
I finished the paper, I sent it off to the #1 journal of anthropology, and then all hell broke loose.
I think he knows he's wrong. That's what I really think.
It might be an interesting question of, say, social anthropology, but can't have anything to do with the nature of language. It just doesn't make any sense.
I had people sending me hate mail, accusing me of racist views.
And I think it's a move that many, many intellectuals make to get a little bit of attention.
I was appalled when I read that Chomsky had said that Dan was a charlatan. I know both these people, and that is not right. That is unacceptable.
The reason there was so much fuss is really not very scientific. I mean, it was, here's this guy coming out of the jungle with this language that only he knows, and he's saying that the greatest linguist in history is dead wrong about his most important idea.
I mean, there's also questions about whether any of it's true, but that's another story.
The bitter war of words is in reaction to the grammatical anomaly Dan Everett claims to have found. According to Everett, Pirahã shows no evidence for recursion, the ability to combine an endless number of ideas in a single sentence.
So let's say that we have the simple sentence like, Bill saw Mary. And now we want to make that part of a larger sentence. John said that Bill saw Mary. But for this to be recursion, we have to be able to keep going. So we might want to say something like, John said, that Bill said, that Mary said, that Peter said, that Irving bought a house. And that is true recursion, the ability for a sentence to just keep going on forever. If in a language you can show there is a largest sentence and you can't make it any larger, that language doesn't have recursion. And Pirahã is such a language.
In 2002, Noam Chomsky proposed that recursion is the basis of all human language, a key component of his theory of universal grammar, the most influential idea in linguistics. Universal grammar argues the structure of language, the grammar, is innately found in the human genome, something we are born with rather than learn. According to the theory, all human languages, regardless of their surface differences, share a common deep structure, a universal grammar. It's a powerful idea, and it's dominated linguistics for more than 50 years.
In the modern sense, universal grammar is just the theory of the genetic component of the language faculty. That it exists is hard to deny.
If Everett is right about Pirahã, then many believe the case for universal grammar is severely undermined.
Chomsky, who kind of has an outsized influence in linguistics, whatever his latest pronouncement is, everyone takes very seriously. In a recent paper, Chomsky argued that the narrow language faculty, the part of language that's specific to language, consists only of an ability to do recursion. Not every linguist, to put it mildly, accepts that. I don't. But it was out there as the latest statement from Mount Olympus on what's special about language. And so the claim that there's a language that was missing exactly that thing that Chomsky said is essential obviously made it much more interesting to people.
If I'm right and Pirahã does lack recursion, then recursion can't be the universal basis for human language. So one of us is right. and one of us is wrong.
It's now been 2 years since Everett's last visit to the Amazon. At MIT's Brain and Cognitive Sciences Lab, a new expedition is preparing to go and test his claims. Leading the team is Professor Ted Gibson.
I think Dan's most controversial claim is the claim that human language doesn't have to be recursive. It might be right and it might be wrong, and I just don't know the answer. I think that's a very interesting, open controversy. How many rules?
Along with colleague Dr. Steve Piantadosi, Gibson has developed a new computer program for analyzing human language. He's designed it specifically to test Everett's recursion claim. But first, he needs Pirahã recordings.
What Ted and I are doing is trying to make the debate scientific. And so I think that that's really the only way to resolve these kinds of questions. You can't just go back and forth bickering, all the time. You have to have some kind of scientific method and some kind of quantifiable evidence if you want to answer these things.
One of the most interesting properties of this language and culture is that they're uninterested in the outside world, so we get a look at human cognition without the influence of other cultures, just sort of one culture.
This expedition will be the largest and perhaps most rigorous to test Daniel Everett's ideas. In the eyes of many, its results may well settle this debate. Everett will accompany the team as translator. But taking on the world's leading linguist is more than an academic argument. It strikes at the heart of where human language stems from.
What makes us human? That's what this debate is all about. Where does our language come from? Is our language some mysterious gene that somehow crept into our evolution? If so, that's worth knowing. That's very interesting. What I'm claiming is that culture can affect not just the words of a language, but the entire grammar of a language. And I'm saying that the Pirahã are one clear example of this happening.
Perhaps the most radical claim of Dan Everett is that unusual features of Pirahã grammar are a consequence of features of their culture. Because there's one generalization that I think almost all linguists would agree with, which is that the variation among languages doesn't have a whole lot to do with variations across the cultures of the people who speak the languages. So just to be concrete, in some languages put the verb in the middle and have the object after. John ate the sushi. Some have the verb at the end. John the sushi ate. But do any of these features correlate with some kinds of culture, with more uptight cultures or expressive cultures or intimate cultures or technological cultures? The answer is generally they don't.
For Everett, the detail of how Pirahã culture affects grammar lies in their fixation with the present. This preoccupation, he claims, produces a grammar with only a present tense. A grammar without recursion. A grammar of happiness. On the eve of his departure, Everett gets a call from Brazil's National Indian Foundation, known as FUNAI.
Oi, Pedro, tudo bem? Yeah, I think that it's going to be, I know it's going to be extremely disappointing to Ted and his team. I don't know how I'm going to deal with it. Well, I was just told that, after all this planning and all this effort and having gone down, that Valmir, the local FUNAI supervisor, has said that we can't go back to the village. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think that the only thing I can do is fly all the way down there to Brazil, go talk to Valmir and say, what can we do to make this happen?
With one stamp, Valmir Parinchin can grant Everett access to the Pirahã. He is the regional coordinator of FUNAI, the agency responsible for Brazil's indigenous tribes.
Eu fui dos quando assumi, eu proibi, né, a entrada de todos os tipos de missionários em suas terras, na terra indígena Pirahã. O Daniel tem os Pirahã gostam dele, a gente percebe que os Pirahã gostam, mas hoje nós temos a preocupação da ameaças diretamente da cultura Pirahã, a questão dos missionários, né?
The fact Everett is now a professor of linguistics doesn't appear to count for much. His old occupation continues to haunt him.
So now I'm on my way to Humaitá, Amazonas, to meet with Valmir Parinthintin. Valmir is the one with the power to say whether I can or can't go back to the village right now. If Valmir says no, there's a good chance that that will be no for good. It may be the last chance I ever have to go to the Pirahã.
Everett suspects his religious past is not the sole reason for his rejection. The real cause, he believes, is his collision with the linguistics establishment.
As a result of my work, I've become quite controversial among linguists. A couple of years ago, a couple of U.S. linguists wrote a letter to the National Indian Foundation accusing me of conducting racist research.
When Everett arrives, he's told Valmir is out of town and won't be back for a fortnight.
So he's not there. I came all this way and he's not even there.
With a rejection in the Amazon, the only course left is an appeal to the president of FUNAI in the Brazilian capital.
It's really important for me to get back to the Pirahã. I have spent so much of my life with those people, and I love them so much. So if I'm not allowed to get back there and explain to them, it's like you promise to meet somebody on a street corner and then you never show up. I have no way of accounting for my absence.
While his appeal is assessed, Everett visits friends at the University of Brasilia. Professor Arion Rodrigues and Professor Ana Sueli head the Department of Indigenous Languages. They've invited Everett to give a talk, but it's far from a full house.
I've just been informed that the main linguistics department here at the university has decided once again to boycott my talk because it's critical of their theory. It's frustrating because it's not a real scientific attitude of exchange. This isn't what universities are supposed to be about.
É reativista fechada.
Pois é, não,
nem discutir não quer.
Pois é.
Nem criticar.
Pois é.
As línguas humanas têm aspectos formais. A minha questão é a origem desses aspectos formais, né, da biologia, dada pela genética, como propôs Chomsky na Gramática Universal, ou se são apenas respostas naturais ao problema da comunicação em conjunção com valores culturais de cada povo.
Bom, eu acho que o trabalho do Daniel, no ponto em que está, é extremamente importante para nós linguistas, não só linguistas brasileiros, linguistas no mundo, né?
E eu sei que profissionais linguistas que criticaram Dan Everett foram à FUNAI para tentar impedir a entrada dele em área. Eu acho que na ciência tem que ter discussões, você tem que considerar os achados linguísticos, não é?
Ah, sim.
O que é problemático, ao meu ver, não é? É a imposição, não é? A tentativa, aquela crença, não é? Quando a ciência ela se torna uma religião, não é? Que não pode ser questionada.
Alô, Pedro, aqui fala Daniel.
The following day, news arrives of the team's appeal.
Sim, tá ótimo. Abraço, tá. Tchau. No. I can't go back. These people have refused to meet with me, they refused to talk to me, they refused to let me go there and present my views. All of this takes place behind closed doors at meetings I'm not allowed to be at, with people saying things about me that I'm not allowed to respond to. It is cowardly. I mean, I can't go back this time. I probably never go back as long as these same people are in charge.
Although Dan and the scientists have been blocked, Funai has allowed our film crew to re-enter the reservation. Not knowing if he'll ever see the Pirahã again, Dan records a message for the crew to show them. With the expedition cancelled, Ted Gibson and Steve Piantadossi have found another way to test Everett's claims. They've turned to recordings made over decades by Everett and the missionary who preceded him, Steve Sheldon.
So these are all stories?
Yeah, these are all stories.
And how much of that is Dan's gathering versus Steve Sheldon's?
It's almost all Steve Sheldon's. We have compiled about 800 sentences, and pretty soon we'll have, I think, around 1,500.
Oh, here's a snake.
Yeah, here's what's his name is almost bitten by a snake, and he tells the story of how he arrowed the snake.
The first step is to build a large Pirahã database. Once the database is complete, over 1 million possible Pirahã grammars will be written, some with recursion and some without. Our computer will then test each grammar against the recordings in the database. Its job? Find the grammar that best fits the Pirahã language. If this grammar lacks recursion, Daniel Everett may have the evidence he needs. While the MIT computers grind through 30 years of recordings, our film crew is returning to the Pirahã. Besides delivering Everett's message, we have also been asked to collect more recordings. But when we arrive, what we find is totally unexpected. Since visiting 2 years ago, the Pirahã village of Piquiá has been transformed. The Brazilian government has built a health clinic, toilets, and permanent houses here. This remote corner of the Amazon even has electricity. But perhaps most significant is the presence of a school. Pirahã children are learning Portuguese and how to count.
Parte positiva e a parte negativa, né? Eu acho que a parte positiva é que tem uma energia, né? E até porque é usado os materiais de microscopista, né? De examinar malária, enfim, a parte negativa. A partir do momento que tem uma tecnologia na comunidade, já começa a mudar, né? A cultura totalmente, as crianças. Hoje já mudou totalmente.
Principalmente de metano. Litros de leite e um composto principalmente de metano.
For many outsiders, such change poses a dilemma. On one hand, it empowers the Pirahã. On the other, their unique culture may be lost. After filming, we play Dan's message to the Pirahã. This may be the last time the tribe will ever see him. After 3 months, the MIT computers have finished analyzing the Pirahã database.
Okay, so we finished analyzing our corpus of around 1,000 sentences, and the answer is, as Dan was hypothesizing, I'd say we don't have evidence for recursion in this. You know, the simplest thing I can say is in our analyses of this corpus, there's no clear evidence of recursive structures. So, in particular, we don't see evidence of several hallmarks of recursive structures cross-linguistically, such as conjunction. So that's something that would translate as and in the language. So where we could have John and Bill and Mary and Fred were doing something. Similarly, or, the word or, there's no, John or Mary. There seems to be something different about this language such that doesn't have complex syntactic structure.
For Everett's critics, such findings don't settle the debate.
There are several problems with that. One is that method of testing grammars has absolutely no successes to support it, so we can dismiss it. Secondly, there is no question that the language is based on a recursive procedure.
Will you convert Chomskyans? Probably not, is my guess. They won't be converted, It doesn't feel like they're convertible to me.
When Dan Everett first entered the Amazon 35 years ago, little did he realize that it would end in such controversy. Although science is beginning to validate his ideas, Dan remains unlikely to see the Pirahã again. In response to his message, his old friends have recorded one of their own.
My hope for the Pirahã for the future is that the future is the way they want it to be. It's not my place to say whether they should adapt more or adapt less. We all change. And the Pirahã, I want them to be healthy and happy, what I would want for any group of people.
Ông